Welcome to One Good Thing Media, your official podcast review channel. We search the vast digital landscape on a daily basis to discover the best shows that podcasters have to offer. Are you ready to discover new favorites to add to your playbook? Stay tuned and listen to host Gerald Spies' latest podcast reviews.
Hello everybody, this is Gerald Spear. I hope everybody has been having a great week. Today I am going to be covering a theme, as I do each week, a different theme, and this one is going to be about conspiracies. Now it is government conspiracies, conspiracies that kill people, and conspiracies that aren't conspiracies at all. They're going to be great reviews, great playbacks, and I also have What Are You Listening To?, which is a segment about what I'm binging on this week. First, I'd like to share a word from our sponsor. The sponsors, as you know, are the ones that keep our lights on. This one is particularly near and dear to my heart because our family has been using a product called Who Gives a Crap for at least 5 years. We've supported this company because, number one, we love the products, and although we may not have the power to do something really big to help our environment, I think it's all the little things that we all do that help improve the world that we live in. So if you want to take the next step with us, listen to our promotion, and if you're as drawn to the products as we are, please support us by supporting Who Gives a Crap, our promotional partner for Season 2, Episode 21. I would like to welcome Who Gives a Crap to our family of sponsors. Who Gives a Crap really does give a crap. It's a sustainable company that is literally making the world a better place to live, one bum and one toilet paper roll at a time. The company's toilet paper is plastic-free and made with sustainable materials. It lacks a lot of the chemicals that are used to treat traditional toilet paper, and its super long, soft, and strong rolls feel good on more than your conscience. Who Gives a Crap donates 50% of its profits to improve the lives of people in underdeveloped countries who do not have basic sanitation, including toilets. I also want to add that our family has been a loyal customer of Who Gives a Crap for several years. Scroll down and click on the link that I've included in our show notes. You'll save some bucks on your first purchase, diminish your contribution of waste to the planet, and help those who are unable to help themselves at the same time. Let's start our show off with some news. Our first news bit of this week is actually about us. We are releasing our podcast for the foreseeable future on Tuesdays. As you know, we are a new podcast, or relatively new. We have actually been active with this particular format since October 2023, and we're still looking for our sweet spot. We have been releasing on Thursdays and Fridays, and I just decided, I'd like to start earlier in the week so I could join you on your commute in the early hours or whenever you take off for work. So we're dropping on Tuesdays about 3 in the morning. When you get in your car and take off or hop on your bus, we'll be there with you. My second news bit just makes me happy thinking about it because actor, musician, author, director David Duchovny is now the host of his own podcast, Fail Better with David Duchovny. There's just something about this man. I love everything that he does. I really like X-Files, but Californication, oh my God, I lived for that series. And even today, we have a player in our travel home. And when we're on trips, during the summer at night, we always kick back with some treat we bought at a grocery store somewhere, like ice cream, and just binge on Californication. It never grows old, and I never get tired of seeing the series, one episode after another, even though I've viewed them 10 times. So you can imagine how excited I was to see that David now has his own show. David Duchovny interviews really stellar stars like Bette Midler, who talk about some of the times in their life where they succeeded and others where they failed spectacularly. And when the people that he interviews, in this particular case, there's been two of them so far, which is Ben Stiller and Bette Midler, and of course, insights along the way from David Duchovny, you learn about not only some spectacular fails, like in Bette Midler's case, among others would be Jinxed, the movie, and Zoolander 2 for Ben Stiller, and a few of them mentioned by David Duchovny. You realize that they have lived with them, learned to overcome them, or learned to drive around them. But the way that they remember them, you realize that even though they have a scab on their wounds, the wounds are still there. And rather than dwell on them, it seems like that pain has brought them wisdom about what happened, why it did, and what they could do better in the future, or at least, as David says, fail better. If you've listened to my other episodes, you know that I absolutely love Delia D'Ambra's investigative journalistic style, her approach of boots on the ground when working with true crime cases. Well, she has a program, it's called Counterclock. And Counterclock to her means that when you're investigating a crime, you have to turn back the time or turn back the clock and start from the beginning of when the crime occurred, what happened, who was involved, interviewing witnesses from the very beginning and working your way up. Counterclock is in its 6th season, but there's quite a break in between seasons, and it's mainly because Delia D'Ambra is actually investigating on the spot with certain crimes that she chooses to take, and there's one case per season. So we have season 6. And God bless Delia for her premiere of season 6. She has dropped multiple episodes, so you don't just get a taste of it with episode 1 and maybe the trailer. So this particular one happens in her backyard, so to speak, because she was raised in North Carolina near where this crime took place. And so she has a very personal stake in this. I've listened to the trailers, I've listened to the build-up for it, because, it's by Audio Chuck and they have such a good promotional department. But I am going to kick back today and binge the 4 episodes that have already been posted, and I suggest you do the same. Gerald! Huh? That sounds like me. What are you listening to? Oh yeah, I have a new segment just for you. And of course you can tell by now, since my AI already gave it away. It's called, What Are You Listening To? This week I binged a podcast called Wait For It. And Wait is spelled Weight by Ronald Young Jr. He is so endearing. He is a critically acclaimed audio producer, host, and storyteller. He's based in Alexandria, Virginia, and he has another podcast that's called Leaving the Theater, where he reviews movies right after he walks out of the door. So if you're interested in movies, I suggest that you also check out Leaving the Theater. In Wait For It, he talks about dreaming of being tall and fit when he grew up, perfect moments, just like you see in the movies where a thin person falls in love with another thin person and they live happily ever after. When Ron got into his late 20s, he gained weight and he became quite obese. And he had to rethink his life based on his worth in a world where his weight and his appearance minimized who he was. I have never been obese. However, I was raised in a family where my father and my brother were obese, and I saw their struggles. And so I really attached to Ron, knowing what my family went through and how we grew up. It's like, here I was, this skinny kid, heavy-set brother, very heavy-set father. I remember the day that my father became so heavy that he couldn't be weighed on the family scales. And what that did to his face, I saw his face fall. It was terrible. Ron, I've certainly experienced it very closely in a vicarious manner. He has friends with him that they talk about different challenges they have. And I was particularly struck by one episode that talks about a challenge with clothing and the fact that it was very difficult, number one, to get fitted, and number two, it was very difficult to buy anything fashionable. And manufacturers seemed rather unapologetic about it. Now, some of that is changing. Of course, we've had Lane Bryant for a while, but as people point out who are on his show, it's really more of a business casual store. So unless you want to wear business casual, you're still hard-pressed to find fashionable clothing. So Ron brings on this guest that just absolutely opened my eyes. She was talking about clothing pattern makers and the fact that the standard, now I'm just talking about the standard in the industry, is that everything is based on a size 6 to 8, either pants or dress. And so you can either trim that down or you can expand that out for plus sizes. But unfortunately, it doesn't really work with plus sizes because people do not evenly gain weight. Even when you go to a store and you can find like a size 24, for instance, 9 times out of 10, it doesn't fit. And it's very depressing, at least to me, that you can't celebrate yourself at any size. Big Ron also talks about always dreaming of his perfect moment, meeting the perfect woman, having the perfect date, and he's realized that he's now 39 and he's still waiting.
I can't remember a time when I wasn't thinking about my weight. Waiting.
The bigger you get, the smaller you feel in some ways.
The weight.
You start to feel like invisible, or like you just don't count. You don't matter.
Wait for it. I survey rooms for chairs, couches, anything you can sit on.
I had strategically decided where I was going to sit based on my weight.
Always trying to be one step ahead.
I would purposefully book with airlines whose seats were even an inch bigger,
so that I don't end up embarrassing myself.
Or you're like not a full person participating in the world.
My mom once talked to me about whether we should get my jaw wired shut.
I mean, nobody wanted a relationship with me.
My brother told me he didn't want to be seen with me.
It has to be my physical appearance.
A lot of my adult life has been spent waiting.
You don't matter.
Waiting. Embarrassing myself. Waiting.
So I settled.
Waiting. The wait. This show not only tells the stories of those waiting, but of those who can't keep weight off their minds.
And despite the tough subjects that Ron addresses and brings experts in to talk about them as well, it's actually an uplifting show. And that is due to Ron, who he is, and how he presents his life and his future. And I think everybody should watch this, whether you're fighting to control your weight or not. This is an excellent show. And like I said, I binged it. And what I didn't tell you is I binged it in a day. I devoted the whole day to you, Ron. He promised season 2 to start in January. Of course, it's now May, and he's not showing up with his second season, but being the eternal optimist, I am still patiently waiting for Ron's second season to drop. It's now time to get to the main part of our show, which this week is going to focus on conspiracies. Mankind has been surrounded by conspiracies since the first humans who walked on Earth learned how to talk. I firmly believe that. I think it's in our human nature to sometimes believe the fantastical. It's exciting. It justifies our angst that we're feeling at that particular time, or maybe even our happiness. But it seems like in recent years that the conspiracies that have been swirling around the internet and in tabloids have gotten more and more outrageous. And I'm just scanning through the last few years and I'm going through all these crazy conspiracies that a lot of people bought into. And one of them is birds aren't real. Do you remember that? Birds aren't real. They're really government drones spying on everybody in this country. I wonder how many poor birds died because of that. And then again, there's always the one about the officials leading our country are not human. They're reptilian humanoids. COVID isn't real. Oh, and the one about Bill Gates, he has inserted a microchip in every COVID vaccine so that he can directly track everyone in the world. And then there are people that I personally call the shedders. They believe that anybody who has had the COVID vaccination sheds live virus. And the live virus is actually infecting other people and causing the pandemic. These same people generally believe that the doctors, during the height of the pandemic, were being paid to diagnose every hospital death as COVID, even when the person died in a car accident. And Elvis Presley, he's still alive and well. He's working as an Elvis impersonator in Las Vegas. Of course, that doesn't mean that we don't need to use our critical thinking when we're actually concerned about a conspiracy, because in some cases, they do turn out to be true. But those are few and far between. Generally, conspiracies are born from the imagination of people, and in some cases, just some, they can prove deadly. And I'm going to discuss one such conspiracy in my first review.
Trigger warning. This episode contains mentions of domestic violence, stranger violence, and sexual and emotional abuse. If you are triggered by these topics, please leave now.
The first podcast that I'm covering today is called We Were Three, and it focuses on the effects of COVID on one family during the height of the pandemic. But does it really? Because it really has a lot to do with how this family died because of their dysfunctional dynamics from birth, and the fact that as they became more radicalized, they also became more isolated and ended up in an echo chamber where other dysfunctional people confirmed that what they were feeling was the absolute truth, and the only way they could survive was to outwit the establishment. I first listened to We Were Three in 2022, and I was absolutely enthralled with the message and the story, and I particularly loved Rachel McKibbins, who was the daughter of the family. She now lives on the East Coast, and she's a poet and just a really grounded woman. She would be the type of person that if I met her in a social setting, I would want to get to know more about her. The other two people of the family, it's a very tiny family, are Pete, the father, and Peter, the son. So there's only the three of them. Of course, they have a cousin involved, and they have the internet and all sorts of things to hang on to as far as what they believe. But everything comes from Rachel's point of view. She talks about how they were raised, the fact that her father was equal parts a violent alcoholic and an extremely loving father, which is very confusing to a child who never knew which father they were going to meet that day. We Were Three only has 3 episodes, but each episode is impactful, the information is moving, and I have to tell you, it's haunting. Because after I listened to We Were Three in 2022, I had to go back and listen to it in 2023, and I went back again and I listened to it in 2024. So I would love for you to discover this podcast. I'm going to play a few clips for you. The first one talks a little bit about their upbringing.
Their mother, in court documents, claimed their father beat her, he beat the kids, committed burglaries, did drugs, stole gasoline, had a gun in his car. If any of that ever happened, Rachel never saw it, never heard about it, outside of these contentious court filings. Except the beatings. That part was true.
We lied to the mediators and the child psychologists and the judges. We lied because we wanted to stay with her dad. We didn't want to be in foster homes. We were in separate foster homes, when my mom first put us in. And so, our attachment, we really just needed to be together. I'd rather buckle myself in and let this turbulent life be it than possibly get on separate planes and they all might crash and we'll never know. It was just, we needed to have each other.
They chose their father. They were more frightened of their mother's unpredictability, which never stopped affecting the family. Rachel says she took her first husband's surname, McKibbins, partly to hide from her mother. As a kid, Rachel found her dad to be the more reliable parent.
Because my dad, he would beat the shit out of us, but he would still tuck us in every night and we'd pray together every night. Like there was always some sort of like coming back around at the tail end of violence, and sort of not an unspoken apology was happening with the kiss on the forehead, the tucking into bed, and our nightly prayers.
There was no sexual abuse at home, Rachel says. She's written and talked for years about her father's physical abuse, which was worse when he was drinking, but didn't stop during the times he was trying to stay sober. When Rachel heard the term dry drunk as an adult, a whole mystery from her childhood resolved in her head. There's an incident she's written about in more than one poem. When she told me about it, I got a sense of the rhythm she lived with as a child, how abruptly a moment could turn dangerous and keep turning.
I was on a church playground, and in order to get to it, you had to climb this stucco wall that scratched the shit out of you. And I had a dress on, and I was too small, and all of the other kids had already hopped over. And this man helped me up, and he lifted me over. And he put his hand where I knew it didn't belong. And he wriggled his finger. And afterwards, and then he just stayed on the playground and watched us play. And it was time to climb back over the wall. He hoisted me up and did the same thing to me again. And I told my dad this when he picked me up. I said, that man over there near the bushes, he goosed me, because that was the word I had been given. Like, when we'd poke each other, my dad would, stop goosing each other. Like, we just, poke and mess around the back seat. And he said, what? And I said, he was over there. There was a man over there. The man, he had, like, sweatpants, like a jogging suit. He goosed me.
Rachel was in the front seat next to her father as she was saying this. Peter was in back. Their father turned off the ignition.
He got out of the car and he turned around, or he came around, opened the door, and he yanked me out by my braids and just started smacking me and my body. And
how old were you?
I was in kindergarten, and that was it. I just got beat up and then put back in the car, put your seatbelt on, and then drive home. But he didn't drive home. He drove to my grandmother's, and he just drank like half a bottle of Jack, and told the whole household what happened to me, which I was mortified by. And then I got my hair chopped off. He chopped off my braids to make me less of a girl.
The father's misogyny affected Rachel, of course, because she was being minimized as a female, and that theme carried on throughout her life while she lived in her family unit. But it also spilled over to her brother, who didn't take Rachel seriously when she was trying to help him live when he also had COVID. So here's a little bit of the paranoia. Oh my gosh, the buying into conspiracies that led to her brother's death. In this next clip, both Peter, her brother, and her father, Pete, had died. And she was trying to make sense of what had happened. She couldn't understand why both of them had succumbed to COVID when they seemed relatively healthy. So she went back to the house at some point and she found Peter's phone and she opened it up. It was not password protected. She went to the text and she started scrolling. And Rachel realized that there were text messages not only from her advising her brother to go to the hospital, but also her cousin, who Peter was very close to.
I started charging their phones. And then I heard bloop, 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 like message. And I'm like, God, I didn't think about, like, there's people checking in on my brother. And then I just started reading.
Rachel looked at a text from the cousin she'd just talked to.
And then I just scrolled up, and I just couldn't help but just be invested in their conversation. It's like the black box after a plane crash. It's like hearing ghosts speak of themselves. I mean, I just responded with absolute rage and heartbreak.
This is when Rachel saw herself enter the conversation, when her brother texted her that their father was gone. She saw in the texts how the shock of their father's death had opened up a window of opportunity with Peter. And in that window, Peter had texted her, and she'd convinced him to go to the hospital. Or, as he put it in a text to the cousin,
Rachel demanded that I go to the ER, so I'm going to the ER. That was when I understood that there were dual conversations being.
Now the cousin texts Peter, "What was the steroid called?" And a couple minutes later, "Okay, I just read remdesivir is not a steroid. Phew." Peter texts the cousin an hour later saying, "Rachel said if they want to put you on remdesivir, ask them to pair it with Olumiant. It's a game changer." No response from the cousin. The cousin, 2.5 hours later, "Fuck that. Do not take remdesivir. 54% chance it'll shut down your kidneys." Several hours later, Peter texts the cousin, "They finally brought in a bag of remdesivir, and I said, I'll hold off on that." And he said, "Okay, that's fine." Had no problem with the nurse assistants and the nurse, but soon as the doctor comes and makes a decision, you know it's the ones. The cousin, a minute later, no remdesivir." Peter texts him a photo of an IV bag. The cousin asks, "They're giving it to you?" Peter, "No, I told them I'll pass." The cousin, "Okay. I know you're tired, but keep an eye on those fuckers. Watch everything they're putting in those lines." I'd offer him advice, and I'd see him go to our cousin to get, like, the second opinion, and he would just always derail those efforts. It's just the most unfathomable, absurd conversation to watch happen. He believed he could take better care of himself with exercise and nutrition than some doctor. To someone who saw doctors and hospitals as dangerous, and later as actively seeking to deceive and harm and even kill people for their own gain. The day before he leaves the hospital, Peter texts the cousin, "The doctor finally came down and asked why I won't take remdesivir. And he said, 'You're not vaccinated?' And I said, 'That's correct.' He said that's the only treatment we have for COVID, and that my lungs are going to deteriorate with the oxygen they keep ordering for me if I don't take the remdesivir." The cousin texts back a few minutes later, "Bull, that remdesivir is going to deteriorate your organs, especially your kidneys. You've been pumping ibuprofen all week. He's just trying to scare you so he can get his 20% bonus for using remdesivir. That same doctor will tell you the vaccine is good for you, which makes no sense because now that you're confirmed that you have COVID and you're recovering, it seems like you'll have natural immunity for life. You won't need boosters. Just pray your oxygen level improves so you can get the hell out of there." As Rachel is reading the texts, she keeps glimpsing these moments. "All I have to do is jog a little. I'll get my oxygen back up. Sitting in a hospital bed isn't doing anything oxygen-wise." The cousin, "Do the turmeric and mint leaf lung inhaling exercises at home. Yeah, you're not going to continue to deteriorate. He's a fucking liar." A few minutes later, Rachel texts Peter and they go back and forth about his oxygen levels and whether he has enough energy to eat and if he has a phone charger. Rachel asks him if he's heard an estimated timeline for them to discharge him. Peter texts, "They made it sound like soon, possibly today or tomorrow."
Of course, Peter was lying to her because the next day he actually checked himself out at his own peril, went home, became sicker, and died. So You're looking at all of the conspiracies. Remdesivir destroys your kidneys. No, it doesn't. That the doctors were just there to get money from him. Well, I mean, there was a charge for their services, but no, there was no conspiracy. I can't play everything for you guys. It's too long, and I don't want to ruin it for you. So I definitely suggest that you check out We Were Three. It is by Serial Productions and the New York Times, and hosted by Nancy Updike. My second review today is about remote viewing. And remote viewing is a form of extrasensory perception, or ESP. And the CIA headed up a program that eventually was called Stargate. It had to do with developing psychic spies who could actually practice remote viewing and go anywhere in the world, into any building, any file cabinet, any computer, and find out what was there. It began in 1973 when the CIA got word that Russia and China were investing heavily in developing psychic spies. And so they thought, well, we better see what's going on here because we don't want to fall behind. So they developed a psychic program at Stanford Institute International. It was actually in several locations over the years, but that's where it began, and it was there for quite a long time. It was headed up by a physicist named Russell Targ, and Russell Targ is still alive today. He is 90 years old, and he is telling his story, as he says, before it all dies with him. The program was actually disbanded in 1995. The CIA director at that time declared that it was nonsense, that nothing good came from it. But in that 20 years, the most remarkable things happened, and the results were astounding. There are a couple of podcasts that I'm going to be recommending today, but I'm also going to be recommending a documentary on Amazon. If you're interested in psychic abilities at all, and what our government was doing to help suss out secrets of other countries, I suggest that you access Third Eye Spies. Third Eye Spies is a movie that was produced by Russell Targ in 2018 when almost all of the top secret information about the Stargate program was released. And listen to it first, because he takes you to the very beginning in chronological order about trained psychic spies who use their special abilities to psychically spy on North Korea, Russia, China, any country that the CIA and the government regarded as a threat to our security. And I want to be clear, the psychics that they actually recruited and then trained in their program were not the psychics that you see on television programs where they say, I keep seeing the letter B. They were very specific to prove that it was a legitimate operation. They created a spy exercise where they broke into an NSA facility that was handling an extremely top secret program. And they went into this facility, remotely of course, went down either 3 or 4 levels inside this building, went into a special room and discovered the file cabinets, described their color, looked into the file cabinets, and actually came back and reported the names of the files, which actually ended up being code names for the project. When the facility notified NSA of what they had done, they freaked out. In fact, NSA was positive they had a physical break-in because it was the only explanation they could come up with. Although it was definitely a program that yielded valuable information, the CIA really feared the giggle effect, like, oh man, they are off of their rockers now. If you can't see it, if you can't touch it, it doesn't exist, that sort of mentality. And so they abandoned the program. However, the latest conspiracy theory, which is unproven at the moment, is that the program is still happening in a mountainous region of the United States. I'm going to play clips from 2 podcasts that I recommend. But honestly, if you want to really get into this project, you should first watch the Amazon documentary Third Eye Spies, which is free if you have a Prime membership. The first podcast that I'm recommending is The Sean Ryan Show, and it is episode 95, which is actually 4 hours long. The man that is being interviewed for this particular episode is Joe McMoneagle, and he was involved in the CIA's Project Stargate. Now, Joe did remote viewing for sure, but he also did out-of-body spying, and he is going to describe just some of what he did for the CIA during this program.
Developed my psychic abilities to the point that some have said it's the best in the world. And that's when they decided, well, maybe it would be even better if you could go out of body to a target. The second target I did is a good example. They gave me a picture of a building. And they said, we're not going to tell you where this building is. Your charge here, the mission. A, find the building. Once you found it, countries, nobody cares. Find this building. Once you find the building, go to the, I can't remember, it was second or third floor. Pass through the wall. Go down the hallway. Find the bank vault door. Pass through the vault door into we'll call it a lab. And go to the northwest corner and there's a table, and on the table is an object. Push your face into the object. Collect as much data as you can. Wake yourself up and draw it to detail in scale on a piece of paper. That was my mission. It took me 2.5 weeks of out of bodies just to find the building. And when I found the building, it took 3 or 4 out of bodies to get to the vault room. But I was finally able to pass through the vault door, which is an experience in itself. Passing through a vault door, you can actually feel it. It's like peeling your way through an onion with your molecular shape. I don't know how to explain that, but it's like you can feel every molecule as you pass through it. I don't think it's so much the material as it's the denial of access that does that to you. I can't explain it. But you get inside the room and you go to the northwest corner. I'm not sure I was at the northwest corner. I just went to wherever the table was. And there was an object about this size on the table, and I pushed my face into it, and I memorized it in detail. Tried to understand how the parts interworked with each other, that kind of thing. And then woke myself up, and I went in. I had a drafting table in my home, and I drew a detailed picture of it. And I rolled it up, put it in a tube, and mailed it to the people that had tasked me. They came out some weeks later, 2 guys, and they said, we have some questions we want to ask you. And I said, fine. They said, where did you take high energy physics? And I said, I have never taken high energy physics anywhere. Okay, who do you know that's a high energy physicist? And I said, I know one guy, Ed May. He's my good buddy from the lab, LFR, Laboratories for Fundamental Research. I've known him in the remote viewing area since I started. I said, I know him. He's a low energy physicist. I don't know any high energy physicists. Okay. Where do you check your books out? What libraries? And I was like, oh, come on. I'm starting to think, you don't believe what I did. You think I just psychically figured out what it was, and I've asked people in detail about it. No, we just really want to know where you're selling your books out. So I gave them permission letters to go to the 2 libraries I used and ask, what books did he sign out? That sort of thing. I think they were very badly misled when they saw what books I signed out. So I got the idea that they didn't believe what happened, and it pissed me off. So I said I could build something better than what I saw.
What did you see?
I'm not sure. Some kind of a trigger or something. For a device of some kind. I don't know. But I knew I could build one better just by going into light fiber. This is a copper wire thing. I said I could speed it up 100,000 times with light fiber. In fact, I could make it so fast it would get warm when it runs, or hot even, and melt down. So I'd have to put it in an acrylic cube and run coolant through it. So I did all that, and I drew it in detail, but it was down to about twice the size of a pack of cigarettes. And I drew it to scale in detail with lots of notes and stuff. The big thing was there was a trigger in it. I don't know if there are certain things that if you put too much power to them, it'll kill a city.
When the investigators received all the information, one of their first things they said to him is, "Don't ever go back there again." I'm going to mention one more podcast today. I'm not going to go into great depth about it. It is called Perspective Shift, and they cover remote viewing in episode 142. The hosts of Perspective Shift are Frank Daly and Mike Kittless. And in this particular episode, they dive into background and different stories about Ed Dames, Elizabeth April, Russell Targ, which we've mentioned here before, Robert Monroe, and of course, Joe McMoneagle. The names I just mentioned are a few of the superstars in the remote viewer area. So if you want to just find out who the players are, what they've done, this is a great podcast to become familiar with some of the people that have developed these programs and made them possible. There are 2 other superstars in the remote viewer area. Ingo Swann was the psychic who actually founded remote viewing. And also Pat Price. When he was first discovered by the Institute, they went to his office to talk to him. He had a map right above his desk that had push pins all over the ocean. And they said, what is that? What do you have those pins there for? They were just curious. And Pat says, I track submarines. I track all the submarines all over the world, and about every couple days I move all the pins to where their current location is. And they looked at each other because, that's not even possible today, not all the submarines, and certainly not at all back in 1972 at the time. And he really sold them on the idea that he probably knew a lot that they wanted to know about. Unfortunately, Pat Price died mysteriously in a hotel room in Las Vegas. He had called a friend to tell him that he was experiencing extreme stomach pains, and after they hung up, Pat died. Now, the conspiracy, of course, is that KGB, CIA, somebody killed Pat. But the story goes, and it's on reliable sources, is that when his body was discovered, It was escorted to a hospital by a man carrying a briefcase, presented medical records that showed that Pat had a heart condition, and whether he did or not, I have no idea. And the doctor declared Pat's death as natural. No autopsy was performed. And somehow, I'm not sure how, they cremated Pat's body before his wife was informed that he had died.
One Good Thing Media is brought to you by our host and creator, Gerald Spear. All things technical are by David Dodd, and our announcer is Robert Spear. Our theme song for Season 2 is Force by HGST.